Hello, I'm Bas. I'm a sound designer at Arcane Interactive. And in this video I will go over my thoughts and process behind the audio redesign of the Arcane video that I did a few weeks back. So without further ado, let's get into the project. I took a fighting scene from the series, which is really cool. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out on Netflix. And I took about 19 seconds to redesign. The interesting part about this fight in particular is that there's a lot of electricity sound effects in there, and it was a nice opportunity for me to use some of the samples that I've been designing over the last few months that contain a lot of electricity sound effects with synthesizers. So without further ado, I'll just start out by playing the whole clip so that you know a little bit what we are talking about. All right. So before we start, I quickly want to mention that for me, this project was also a way to explore Reaper a little bit more. I normally work in Cubase and Ableton, and redesigns like this are a great opportunity to develop a certain workflow in another DAW. But with that being said, I still have to figure some stuff out. So if I'm a little bit hesitant or don't know all the shortcuts, then I would definitely want to know if you know a better way to do that. Okay, if I'm starting out with a clip like this, I just always begin with analyzing the whole clip and placing markers with everything that needs some kind of audio treatment. So as you can see here, I placed a lot of markers, and the cool thing with Reaper is that you can set up scripts to auto-color those markers. So if you look here, then you can see that if a shot or a marker is marked as shot, then that means that there's a change of scene, and it will mark it automatically green. And that's really useful because in all the important shots or the important change of shot are marked and easily visible from the main view, and it will automatically do that. So if I make a marker and I will call it shot, then it should be green. Okay, so let's dive a little bit into the general thoughts of this short clip. I'll quickly make an empty track over here so I can easily mute everything just by hitting solo on there. If I go over the clip, there is a big build-up all the way until the moment, which is kind of a climax here when his weapon opens up. So over here we see a lot of detail. It's really focused on its weapon, and also it's building up to this climax, and then the whole frame or the whole picture is for a frame or so completely white, really intense here. And then it just charges this enormous lightning bolt. After that, there is this movement of the staff, and then it starts firing this lightning bolt. This is the release of all the tension that we're going to build up in the first part. After these movements, we have a few shots of the character itself, and we can zoom in on his aggression and his emotion behind this part of the scene. And he's also firing shots of the bolt at the same time. After that, we see some impacts of the shots that are being released. And we see some more close-ups and some more impacts, I think. Yeah. And that's it. So I would normally, in this case, I started out with just designing the first movement and the first shot. And that's all the way up until the release of the lightning bolt, with obviously the lightning bolt being the climax. So I normally start out by just, after I placed all the markers, I will start out by making a sound bed of the ambience. In this case, it's just a room tone. Normally, if it's not a really intense scene, I will make different room tones for each shot or move that a little bit. But because it's such an intense part of this scene, I just have this thing running under everything else just to prevent some digital silence and to embed all these sounds in a room tone. Let me quickly play that. Fairly straightforward. This is just an ambience of a city somewhere in an alley. So when that's done, I would normally just start zooming in on all the things that I've marked here. So here I have a few markers. The beginning of the turn, that's where his hand movement is starting to turn on the wheel. That finishes here. And then over here, we can see that the ignition of the weapon is starting. That goes on all the way over here. And then the electricity is for the first time here in the shot. We go all the way over here to the moment before the weapon opens up. And here it's kind of already, you see it already moving a little bit. And then here there's a climax where it opens up in 2 movements and the whole thing charges. I'm normally starting out by creating a lot of mechanical sounds because that's kind of at least for something like this, it feels like an important thing. And it's also important to exaggerate a little bit. I never really do everything in one go. I would return to creating mechanical sound effects for a part several times during a design, but I will just go over everything that I have here now. The mechanical sound effects, they consist mainly out of 2 things, and that's clicks, mechanical clicks, and some metal impacts and shings, so the metal resonance of swords and whatnot. If I isolate these tracks, we can listen to the first movement. So that's only the mechanical sound effects here. So for a lot of these things are pretty straightforward. For example, I have a few clicks going on here. And the clicks are pretty imaginary because there's nothing really going on here. If we listen to the other sound effects, that's mainly the impact and the metal impacts of this movement. I always like to add a lot of body to this kind of things, especially if it's a close-up. And I think in this case, these are just some things that I created in Faceplant. So this sample, for example, that's something some design elements that I created with Faceplant in a synthesizer. And I just beef it up a little bit more with some saturation and an all-pass filter to make it a little bit more elastic. The same thing goes for this, by the way. It's also just some sweetener, some body to embed the whole thing in. And other sounds consist mainly of metal impacts and some movements. All right. So after that, the mechanical sound effects go into this moment where we where the whole thing or the whole scene that goes over this staff. We see a close-up of the whole thing. We can see every detail, and we want to hear that as well, up until this moment here when the thing is going to open up. So if I isolate those mechanical sound effects, that sounds something like this. And as you can see, even in the mechanical sound effects, you follow the movement a little bit, especially over here. Those are just some metal clicks and rattles, which follow the movement. And that's, I think, also done with, yes, exactly, with some pitch shifting. So after that's being done, the thing starts to open up, and that's an important part for the mechanical sound effects. Let me quickly listen to show that. So there are 2 movements, but I divided it into 3 movements basically. So here, there's the first opening. This is just some rattling of the metal and of all the mechanical clicks that you can hear here. And then there is this moment where the whole thing opens up to the first act. And then there is the third act where we just hear it open up. But there we also have to leave a lot of room for all the electricity sound effects that are going on there. So if we zoom in a little bit, this is mainly clicks and metal rattles and whatnot. But there's also some other interesting things going on here. So a lot of clicks here, they have some kind of saturation, in this case trash, for example, to make them stick out a little bit, or just some dynamics in trash in this case. But one of them, this one, is pretty interesting because here we have just a normal metal impact sound effect, which sound really beefy. And the main reason for that is this cool little plugin from Boom Library, which adds a sine tone on top of a certain threshold. If the amplitude reaches a certain threshold, it will fire basically a synthesized sine tone, which in this case has some pitch shifting and an amplitude of an ADSR to make it sound a little bit like a kick. So if I remove that, you hear it's way less impactful, and with the sine wave on top of it, it will play a sine wave when the loudest moment is about to happen, and that's over here when the thing opens up. Some other things on here is some saturation, and here is an all-pass filter to make it also bounce or make it elastic. But you can use any all-pass filter you like for that. All right, so if I look into the other sound effects for this part, let's go to, let's first go to the whooshes, actually. Whooshes are super important, and I know I tend to make them in separate projects. I never really design my sound effects with synthesizers and stuff. I never really design it in the design itself. I just want to keep on adding stuff and remove stuff and mix it during the redesign. So these are almost all whooshes that I created in separate projects, and a Doppler effect is really useful for that. So let's quickly listen to all the whooshes in this part. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward, to be honest. The whooshes, they are often filtered a little bit according to what they need at that moment. There is one special moment, I think, with the whooshes. Yeah, you see there's just some filtering going on to embed it in the mix to boost low end, cut something around the 1K to make it less, or 2K to make it less noisy. But especially this moment I think is interesting over here, which is more like a boom, not so much a whoosh, to be honest, but I think for mixing purposes it's embedded in this folder. And here the bass is really heavy. This consists of a charging sound and a bass dive over here with, I think, a kick layered on top of it. Or, oh no, this is also some of my own design elements that I created in a synthesizer. So this design element sounds like this. It has some tonality in it, which also makes it interesting. And the bass dive sounds pretty cool on its own if I mute all the effects on here. But I just beefed it up with some compression, or make it less dynamic, and some decapitator, some distortion. Going into the electricity sound effects for this part. The electricity sound effects consist of two folders, actually. And one of the main reasons I chose this redesign is to learn a little bit more about intense electricity sound effects and to use some of the samples that I created over the last half a year or so, I really love to make electricity sound effects. So let me quickly play the whole thing, or this part of the scene, for you. So the electricity sound effects are really important for the build-up, and also for the impact on the moment that the whole thing opens up and starts charging. When I zoom in on some of these sound effects, for example, here, let me quickly isolate it. As you can see, there's quite a lot of processing going on there, so that's interesting. Let me isolate this part. So let me show the automation on this track. And as you can see, I designed a lot with the automation here. So there's some volume automation going on, some pitch shifting with little Alto Boy, which is a pitch shifter from Sound Toys. And later on, there's some EQing automation. But especially the pitch and volume here are quite important. If I disable all the effects, let me show you. Oh, these ones are still on. Sorry. That's the sound. So with some pitch shifting, with some distortion, with snap heap, and in this case, that's doing some distortion and 3-band EQ. And then with trash, which is in this case doing some saturation as well. No, actually it's not doing anything in this case. Can remove it. And some basic EQing. That's just for cutting off the low, which is not really happening right now, but later on in the clip it is. So I would go over a lot of these samples like this. And just start to design them piece by piece. In the other Sparks folder, there are some sparks. I separated them, I think, for mixing purposes. And together they just blend into the whole movement of the electricity here. I think with this also, it's really important, especially during this part, to follow the movement. So follow what's happening in screen. So here you have a big burst of electricity, and then you go into this moment, you kind of build up to the moment that you see the whole thing. Then I love to work with silence a little bit. So here you hear that everything just falls silent for a moment. And then it explodes. The explosion is interesting here because what I found is that if you want to make something like feel that it breaks through sound almost, then cutting these small silences can help a lot. So let me isolate this. These are all sounds that are designed in Faceplant, actually, so that's pretty interesting. It's a lot of impacts and a lot of super processed and distorted sounds. For example, this designed impact. And also these cut up designed flutter layers, which are just really meticulously cut up. A lot of automation here going on as well. So automation on filtering, on pitch shifting. There is stereo imaging going on, more distortion. So I would normally just go through each of these layers and kind of see what's missing in a specific part and add that to the whole mix of this sound. Let me go to something else. So this kind of brings everything together. After I would normally go through the whole project like this, and I will go for after after I told you this, I will go into some of the other sound effects, like the impacts and the shots of the weapon. But after I've done that all, normally I would start to add Foley. I do that in the end because it's not always necessary to add Foley. But if I isolate that, you can hear what the Foley is in this part. And I think it's only that. Yeah. So just to accentuate the movement of the character here a little bit, you hear his clothing move with the staff movement, and you can hear some imaginary wrinkling of metal artifacts that he has on his clothing. Okay, so let me go over to the next part, the next scene, and those are the shots. Let me quickly play that for you. In here, I did pretty much the same thing with the electricity. So everything here is made with a lot of automation, a lot of sounds from synthesizers, like this designed intense sci-fi flutter, also made in Faceplant in another session. Electricity loop sparks, which I think are made with one of those metal measuring things, rollers. If you flap that around and just process a lot, then you can get something like this, which is cool. And like I already explained, I would just go over this and automate it according to the movement and start to mix those layers together. Let me quickly isolate them. And here they function mainly as chargers for the eventual impacts. There are some other things here as well, like the high-pitched tones. Let me see if I can find them. Oh, yeah, they are over here in the charging section. These are just high-pitched things. Which I think I made them actually in this project. Yeah, I have over here the serum patch, which are just basically charging. Charging sound effects. And I would resample them, and I really love to use this rolling sampler from Bird for this. If I play it, I can just, I think this is super cool. I can just drag this in here, bam, and you have it resampled. This is a script for Reaper specifically, but I also bought the plugin, so you can also use it in other DAWs. So those charging things are super important for the high pitch, because that's lacking a little bit in all the other electricity sound effects. It's super simple, but on top of everything else, of all the other electricity sound effects, yeah, I think it helps a lot. But I think, I also used whooshes here a lot for the charging of the lightning bolt and the movement. Oh no, it's only the movement here. Those are pretty straightforward. Also designed sounds in another project. I designed this, and these are just really intense metal whooshes. Or the normal whoosh, and this is not my own. This is from a library. It's a metal whoosh, I think. Yeah. But let me get to the more interesting stuff in this scene, and that's the shots of the staff. So the shots of the staff, they sound like this. And I think the interesting thing about these shots, and to have them feel like big impact, is to not perfectly align all your impacts that you're using. So let me expand this. This again are a lot of or almost everything is sound that I made in Faceplant. Again, not in this session, because it takes quite some time to get to this kind of sounds. But together, they can sound super interesting. And isolated as well, but if I isolate one of them, you can hear how underwhelming it can be. Well, it's pretty intense, but here is also some electricity sound effects embedded in them. But together, and especially if you don't align them, but just make a small difference in timing over a really short period of time, then it can be really interesting. And I would just use different variations of those samples. I never create a sound and just make one sample of that. I always create several samples for that. They are placed on different timings, on different moments, different samples, but they all sound more or less the same because it's from the same design session. If we look into the processing of this whole thing, then then I think it's pretty simple, to be honest. There's some filtering going on. Some things, they don't have the low end anymore, so that's because that's already taken care of by other elements. And it's just pretty raw, to be honest. And on the group level, there's some compression going on and some filtering and a limiter. And the mechanical sound effects here are also of great importance, I think. Let me quickly play that for you. A lot of metal sound effects there. Here, I think the one with the Enforcer Boom Library plugin is really important. This one, because that gives it the body. Oh, sorry, that gives it the body that you need for those shots. This is all also going through a lot of on group level. So all these mechanical sound effects, they go through some extra saturation, really subtle, but some filtering, and denoiser for removing noise just on like a global level that can work really well to make it a little bit more clear. And an enforcer as well to add a little bit more low end, and some other EQing. If I remove all of this, then you can hear the difference. And if I add all these plugins, it makes it a little bit more straightforward, I think. Okay. So we've had whooshes and we had the shots of the staff. Also over here, there are some Foley character Foley going on, pretty straightforward. Except for the voice. That's the only thing that really stands out, I think, here. I used some samples for that, just cut them up. This is something that I found on Soundly, my cloud library that I use a lot. And they are just samples of a shouting man, and I cut them up and processed them a little bit, give them a little bit of reverb, and embedded them in the rest of the sound. Also, on the moment that he shoots something, then you hear his voice being dipped in terms of volume a little bit. At the moment, I know how to set up sidechaining, but I think back then I didn't know because this is one of my first projects in Reaper. So normally you can also do this with sidechaining on the shots. Going on to the last part, and that's all the impacts of this video. Let me quickly play that for you. Oh, over here. So in here, the most important part is the electricity sound effects. The whooshes are super important here. The projectile, impact, and the shots of the staff itself. If I isolate the projectile and the shots, you can hear how that sounds. Those impacts, they are also made with the same elements as what I used for the shots, and in that way they are kind of connected. So if I isolate them and let me zoom in on it a little bit, as you can see, there's a lot going on. Again, these are a lot of designed elements in Faceplant. I just have a big library of them, and I tend to go through it and just use whatever I can. So there's, for example, here, some electricity sparks. This is from another library, but also here, some textures. There is a snare, which I designed in Faceplant. There is an explosion also made in Faceplant. And some thunder. So this is all, and this as well, all made in synthesizers. But by layering it, you can get a little bit, it still will sound really designed in that sense, but that's not, that's okay in this case, I think. So that's, if you combine that, it makes a really interesting combination. And especially if you have these silences in between of these multiple impacts behind each other, you can get this kind of sound, which is, I think, super important for getting punch and impact. Yeah. As you can see, there's almost no processing going on here, which is maybe a bit of a shame. I can mix this better. But this is all done on group level. So on group level, there is some EQing going on. There is some, in Snapheap, some limiter, some compression, an all-pass filter, some distortion, and a limiter. And for EQing, I use this to automate the high pass a little bit. So you see, yeah, exactly. Sometimes I just cut the high end away for a little bit. Yeah, and all these super intense over-the-top sounds, those are made with the same technique, also in Faceplant, that I use in another video about explosions. So definitely check that out if you want to know how to make that. So in the end, this is just a lot of layering. Bass dives, also super interesting to add that in explosions to give just that really that low sound in your impact. This is just an explosion that I use from another library. It's nice. These are basses also created with synthesizers. So, but what's also almost as important as the impacts itself is the build up towards it, and that you can do that really well, or you can take care of that by using swooshes and swishes and all that kind of stuff. So let's have a listen to that. So as you can see, whooshes here are used as a build up before an impact. For example, here. And adding movement to the projectiles, but it's also used for bigger movements of the character, for example here. Makes it super intense. I think the processing here is also really straightforward. Yeah, exactly. Just not, it's maybe on this one. Those are some chord whooshes, which is for the movement of the enemy that's flying away here. That just has some, yeah, some basic EQing, or pretty intense EQing actually. Some pitch shifting, which doesn't have any automation in this case, and some saturation to make it punch through the mix. Electricity, that's, yeah, also because it's an electricity weapon, it's super important. Oh, sorry. But as you can see, it's mainly used for charging stuff. And that's the same as I already explained before, just by doing a lot of automation. But if you have a build-up, for example, over here, I really love to cut it up a little bit like this. And you have this charging sound and then a little stutter before the impact happens. I just like that a lot. Mechanical sound effects are mainly here as a form of recharging when he moves his staff. And that's about it. I think there are also quite some Foley sounds going on here, but they just disappear in the whole mix if I isolate them. Also some enemy sound effects, I think, and you just don't hear them because of all the explosions, but yeah, I don't know. That's maybe not even necessary, but I just like to add them for detail, mix them out later if possible. In this case, if you pay attention to them, you can hear it. There's this one really interesting sound, and I think it's in the electricity or the explosion folder. And that's that charging sound. Or it's in the impacts. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So the shots of the staff has this really cool sound of the electricity. And let me find that one. Yeah, this is just a sample of a magic spell that's being casted from a library, which is super cool. And that makes it just stutter a little bit and almost overheating the whole thing before you fire it up again. So that's it. I hope you found this useful, going over this. In general, I would say that I would do a pass like this, just focus on different elements, going through the whole thing, divide it into main elements and zoom in on small details. And I would do this like 3 or 4 times before coming to a result like this. So the first time it's not that I do this in one time. It takes several attempts to really come to the core of what you're designing.
That was about it. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.
Hey there, I appreciate you watching the video. If you like this one, check out this video or that video. If you want to support the channel, make sure to click on top of my head on the logo and subscribe to the channel.